Should we adopt the culture of society? Is the religion of Islam compatible with the Western culture, or does it have a culture of its own? Join our discussion today on culture versus religion.
इस्लाम कुछ भी हो जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Beacon of Truth, a live program in which we discuss a variety of contemporary issues which are relevant to today's young Muslims. To help analyze these subjects, we get the views and expertise of some guests and the general public. You can get in touch with us with your comments and questions via Twitter and Instagram using hashtag BeaconMTA. Today we are also conducting an online poll about the subject at hand. On social media we asked you, did the culture you grew up in affect the way that you practice your faith? We encourage you to take part in this as well, and inshallah later on in the program we will share the results of this poll. Today I'm joined by my two colleagues, Hafiz Mujibur Rahman Sahib and Sadiq Ahmed Sahib, both of whom are serving as imams of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community here in Canada. Today's topic is culture versus religion, and as you may know, Islam is a universal religion, which means that it did not come for one place and one time period. In fact, it is a religion for all places and all times to come. So when we say Islam, we should not only think of the Middle East from where it spread. We should not think that it is the way of life restricted to any particular nation or any particular language. In fact, right now, there are more than 1 billion Muslims throughout the world. It is one of the fastest growing religions in North America. There are Muslims in China, and it is the majority religion on the African continent. So it is not the way of life of any one people or any one culture. To truly understand Islam, it is important to understand that Islam is not based on race or culture. Islam is the submission to God the Almighty. And this expresses itself firstly in an individual, and then within a community, and ultimately in the whole collective nation. This is what we are discussing today, the effect of religion on culture and the effect of culture on religion, and where do we draw that line? But before we begin our discussion, let's listen to what some of the public has to say on this topic.
I guess because a lot of it is like a lot of culture influences you, and especially like where we live in Canada.
I think it is difficult nowadays because people are a lot more open-minded and free, but I think religion gives you that base, so you know where to stray and where to stay on.
I think that your environment definitely influences your culture and a lot of the beliefs that you have. And the more exposed you are to Canadian culture, Western culture, the more you're able to, I think you just know more about the world and the different types of beliefs there are. And then at the end of the day, you have your own set of beliefs.
At the end of the day, it's just how deeply religion is embedded inside your heart and your mind.
First thing that comes to my mind is family, because that's the way that I was brought up, and it's a part of my life. It's different now because I'm growing into my own person and I have my own beliefs, but definitely my family helped build a foundation. People pick and choose the parts of the religion that they want to follow, and so I think culture helps influence that, but I think at the end of the day it's the individual person and how they deal with that and what they want to accept.
So Sadiq Saab, one of the comments that we just heard, that religion gives you your base, and this is probably going to be one of the recurring themes in our today's program. But before getting into that, let's define religion, let's define culture. How are these related? And also, what seems to be more important to people? Is it their religion or is it their culture?
Right, culture is a very broad term. We hear terms like music culture or food culture or, all other types of cultures. But, we can define culture as norms, collective norms or rituals or customs that a group of people share. In other words, we can call it a way of life. a way people do things. This can be defined as cultures. Now, in order to understand this better, let's take a look at the example of a Muslim family living here, residing here in North America, a Muslim family residing in Africa, a Muslim family residing in Europe, and another Muslim family residing in Asia. Now, all these families, they belong to one religion, the religion of Islam. But since they are living in different parts of the world, they are part of different cultures, so they would do things differently. Their food would be different, their clothing would be different, and of course, their language would be different. But along with these differences which come with the various countries, they would also have various cultural elements, customs, and rituals that they would be part of, which have nothing to do with Islam. And when you look at any group of people belonging to any one religion, but residing in different parts of the world, they would be going through the same thing. So this is the example which is given to understand what the culture is and how culture is defined. Now, coming back to what religion is. Religion is a set of beliefs which defines a person. He believes in something, he chooses to practice. So culture is something that is all around you. You're living in it every day. But religion is something that you choose to practice. Religion can be practiced in any culture. It does not have any boundaries as such. So this is one way we can differentiate between what culture is and what religion is. So culture is a part of day-to-day life, while religion is something that a person chooses. In any given culture, you can find people who are non-religious. They would be non-practicing or atheists. So this is the case with culture and religion. So there's a very strong link. There's a very strong connection between culture and religion. So one example we can take is that look at punctuality, for example. Our religion, Islam, teaches us to be disciplined. It teaches us punctuality. We have the 5 daily prayers, and we are asked or we are prescribed these prayers at certain times. And if we were following our religious obligation and offering these prayers on time, then it would also make us punctual. But we see that when people move away from their religious values, their religious obligations, then they also lose this noble quality of being punctual. And it's unfortunate, but this is the case. As Muslims have moved away from their religious obligation, they have also lost this very noble quality. We as a people, it's unfortunate, but as a people coming from Asia, we are associated with being late or not being on time. And the various events or receptions that we attend, they always tend to start late. I personally have attended various events, various receptions, and they start an hour or even more, after that. And sometimes a person, is forced to think that why do I keep coming to these things on time when they're always starting late? So first of all, it's not fair to the people who do show up on time, who give preference to punctuality. So this is the difference between religious values and cultural elements. Our religion tells us to be punctual, but when we see our culture, we see that people give preference to various cultural elements. So it seems that culture in their life plays a more dominant role.
Where in fact it should be the opposite. It should be religion, because that's with the teachings which are taking you to have a more fulfilling life and a better life, and punctuality is just one key aspect of that. Now, Hafiz Saab, keeping in mind that Muslims, they reside in every country of the world, and every society has its own set of values. Even the individuals have their own ways of life. So how can a Muslim practice the same Islam yet still living in the different countries?
So first of all, Islam establishes that every person is born of pure character and they can achieve a high spiritual status. The Holy Quran guides us in chapter 31, verse 30, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. This means that man has been created on the nature of God, a pure nature. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ has further elaborated when he said, مَا مِن مَوْلُودٍ إِلَّا يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ. That every single child is born on a pure nature, and it is his parents that make him a Jew or a Christian, and the hadith goes on. So what this hadith And this verse of the Holy Quran tells us is that in Islam, everyone is born pure. And then societies do have an effect, as we have been discussing. Culture does have an effect on the character of a person. So how can we practice the same Islam all around the world? Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu anhu, he initiated the scheme of Tehreek-e-Jadid many decades ago. And one of the goals of that scheme was to replicate that perfect Islamic culture that was in Qadian, to replicate it all around the world. And we have seen that happen. We have seen it replicated in Rabwa, in London, and in many other parts of the world. And in these societies we see, even in the West, we see that Ahmadis, we have the same culture, the same religious culture. We have the same auxiliaries working, we have the same programs of Talim and Tarbiyat and the Ijlasat, and everything that is going on is the same. And also, if we now, anyone living in the world through social media, we can stay connected with the rope of Allah Ta'ala, with Khilafat. And through the weekly Friday sermons of beloved Hazur, may Allah be his helper, and also the classes and the various lectures that he gives, if we focus ourselves and if we affiliate ourselves with the rope of Allah Ta'ala and with Ahmadiyyat, then we will be able to practice the exact same Islam no matter where we are staying. So, for example, if you look at Jalsa Salanas of Ahmadis, if you visit a Jalsa Salana in Canada or in Sierra Leone or Uganda or any other country, you will feel as if you're in the exact same religious atmosphere. The faces will be different, but the souls of people are the same. They have the same noble objective. They have the same teaching, the understanding of religion. And so when a person visits various jalsas, I'm sure many of us have done so around the world, you feel as if you're in the exact same atmosphere. And this is exactly what was one of the objectives of Tehreek-e-Jadid. So in this way, if we affiliate ourselves with Ahmadiyyat and with Khilafat, we can practice the exact same Islam no matter where we are.
So regardless if there's an Ahmadi who is in Africa or in Asia or in North America, because of their ideals are the same, their values are the same, and their way of practicing the Islam is virtually the same. And now, historically speaking, has a specific culture, has it ever resulted in creating more spiritual people?
When we look at the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he created a very special society. He transformed those people who were interested in only gambling and drinking alcohol and women, and he changed their interest into the love of Allah Ta'ala, the love of people, the love of bettering oneself, bettering one's character in terms of morality and spirituality. And that was a very unique time. But even after the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he had prophesied that Mujaddideen would appear, a reformer, at the head of every century. And if we study the history of Islam, those Mujaddids came from all around the world, or from various countries. And also there have been saints and religious people in the history of Islam, from Spain to China to all parts of the world, and now even in the West. So, of course, Islam can be practiced no matter where you are, and this is proven through history. Even recently, if we look at the promised Messiah al-Islam, he was raised in a society where all kinds of people lived who were affiliated with various religions. With Sikhs lived there, Hindus and Christians, and the promised Messiah al-Islam had interactions with all of them. And he lived under a British government. But in that society, that was not just purely Islamic, it was an intermixed society, he was able to practice Islam so perfectly and to such a great extent that the angels were compelled to say, Haza rajulun yuhibbu Rasulullah, that this is the man that loves the Holy Prophet ﷺ more so than anyone else. And Allah chose him to lead the Muslims all around the world. Then if we look at our beloved Khulafa, if we study their lives, we see that they have studied in the United Kingdom, they visited Africa, they have stayed in various parts of Asia. So they have lived in cultures with different foods, different values, different traditions, different ways of life, emphasis on various things. But as we have been discussing, Islam was not hindered for them in any way. They progressed in their spirituality no matter where they were, and they progressed so much so that Allah Ta'ala chose them to become the Khalifa of the time and lead Ahmadis all around the world.
Jazakallah. Now, I mentioned in the beginning of the program that you can send us your comments and your questions. You can send us these questions via Twitter or Instagram using hashtag BeaconMTA. We will take some of those comments that have been coming in. Tahira Chaudhry Sahiba, she writes in saying that people often keep fluctuating between culture and religion, and they tend to stumble because of their vague understanding of these two. Then she says the question is not to keep a balance, it's about how to prioritize religion over culture whenever a conflict arises. Similarly, A.Q. Qudsiya Sahiba, she writes that we are living in different cultures, but it is important to follow the one religion we practice. Culture should not overrule religion as a principle. And Malik Sahiba, she writes that it could be challenging to maintain balance between the two, but the basic rule is to give precedence to Islamic values over any culture.
And Anansa, we can all agree with this comment, right? As long as the culture that we reside in does not infringe upon our religious values, this is how we can maintain that balance. We should always give precedence to our religious values, as I mentioned in the beginning, compared to the various cultural elements that are found, because they could be in contradiction with our religion.
But if they're not contradicting, then of course that cultural aspect, obviously, as we said, can be followed. And Tahir Shafi Sahib, he says that there is a big difference between culture and religion. Religion makes our life easy, but culture makes it harder because it's in people's hands.
Yes, Hanan Sahib, as Tahir Sahib has correctly assessed, and I've just mentioned, religion does make life easier for the people. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ, if you look at his life, he freed the Arab people of the shackles of all the superstitions and various customs that they were, they held at that time. And he freed them, and he allowed them to practice a religion which is very straightforward and easy.
Jazakallah. As we go from place to place and from culture to culture, we observe different practices and various customs. People of the same religion, but perhaps from different cultures, may be practicing the same religious values, but in a different form. And that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, as you have heard today. It does, however, become an impediment to the religion when there are harmful innovations that creep their way into the practices of religion, which are ultimately against the principles of that religion. But before getting deeper into this discussion, let's hear from the public on this.
I'd say it varies. Actually, no, it doesn't, because there's rules, and it's the same thing here. You have the law, right? So you abide by the law, or else there's ramifications and consequences for them, right? So in Islam, we believe in the hereafter, and with that being said, your sins, your mistakes, and everything gets carried on with you, right? After you pass away. So with that being said, like in this first world country where you have alcohol, right now marijuana becoming legalized, things like cigarettes being legal, it's not something that we should take, because in the religion itself, it tells us not to take anything, ingest anything that messes our psychological state or harms our body.
Of course, especially in the Western society, you have more religious freedom than any other society in the world. So no one's stopping you from practicing your own religion. No one's stopping you from following your own ideals or following your own religious figures. So you have complete freedom. It's totally up to you if you want to follow, if you want to keep treading in the path of religion or not. And like I go to university and I have I have a dedicated prayer room over there. I can go over there and offer all my prayers. I can, there are bars in our university as well, but it's totally up to us to not get ourselves involved in that culture and to stay connected with the religion.
So religious freedoms, obviously one of the most important tenets of Islam. Islam teaches that there has to be religious freedoms in society. But with religious freedoms, although we can practice freely, but it also puts us at this crossroads. There's always new ideas, new thoughts, new innovations. So Sadiq Sahib, what is considered to be an innovation or a bid'ah in Islam? Let's define this first, and also what are the harms of these innovations?
Right, so innovation is introducing something new or adding something new in the religion which cannot be found in previous practice. And in religious terms, we can say that an innovation is adding a new custom, any new ritual, or a new way of doing something which cannot be found in previous practice. And for example, we can see that in the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, while Huzur was present, some companions, they got together and they made this oath. They took an oath that we would not marry, and that we would worship all night, and that we would fast every day. And once the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he came to know of this, he called these companions and he said, "Look at my practice. I have married, I worship at night, but I also take rest. I fast, and sometimes I do not fast." And then the Holy Prophet ﷺ told them that anyone who evades my practice, my sunnah, is not from me. So now this happened while the Holy Prophet ﷺ was present. And these companions thought, okay, we have the commandments of Islam, we have the Holy Prophet ﷺ. But even then, they thought that they should do something different. They tried to do something differently from the practice of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And Huzur stopped them and he said that, look at my practice. Look at how I practice Islam and then try to adopt that way. Right? Even though their intention may have been good, but their method was wrong. So even in order to excel in our spirituality, we have to turn and we have to look at the noble example of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in this day and age, the promised Messiah ﷺ has also extensively spoken about this subject of innovations. And Huzur has explained that any ritual, any custom, any practice which is carried out in contradiction with the Book of Allah, that is the Holy Quran, and in contradiction with the practice, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, will be considered an innovation. And Huzur says, stay away from all kinds of innovations, because innovations are such that they lead to destruction. So this is a clear warning that we have received from the Imam of the age. Now, coming to the various harmful impacts of innovations. When we study the religion of Islam, we see that we have three principal sources of guidance in Islam. Number one being the Book of Allah, the Holy Quran. It contains commandments for us. It contains a life code for us, things that we should do, things that we should stay away from. Then we have the practice, the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Holy Quran was revealed to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So all the commandments which Allah Ta'ala has given in the Holy Quran were put to practice by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Through his practice, he explained how you should act upon a certain commandment, how we should do this, or how we should stay away from this. So in order to understand Islam better, in order to practice it in a correct manner, it would be to follow that example of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then, of course, the third principal source is ahadith, sayings of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which Huzur has taken various aspects of Islam and he has explained, has given his commentary on various things. He has told us in regards to various commandments that what we should do and what we should not do.
Jazakallah, Sadiq Saab. Hafiz Saab, sometimes our youngsters, they ask this question that, is it necessary to uphold the traditions of which are more rooted in Ahmadiyyat, but maybe they don't have a significant Islamic value to them? For example, wearing shalwar kameez, or perhaps wearing the jinnah cap, or keeping a beard. So what do we tell to those? Is it necessary to uphold these traditions?
Yeah, so first of all, there's no one dress in Islam. There's no one abaya or hijab or burqa or shalwar kameez that you can say, this is the dress of Islam. Islam generally guides us to dress modestly. If you look at the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he wore all kinds of clothes. He received a Habshi shirt and he wore that. He wore a unique red dress, which was uncommon in the Arabs, from Yemen, and he wore that as well. He also received clothes from Rome and he wore those as well. So his clothing was international. And when we look at the Holy Quran guides us in chapter 7, verse 27, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وريشا. That, O children of Adam, we have sent down a clothing for you to cover your shame and as an elegant dress. But the essence is وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. The clothing of righteousness is the essence, is the most right thing. And this is what the promised Messiah ﷺ has reiterated again and again in his writings. If we study the writings of the promised Messiah ﷺ, we will see that he has mentioned that Muslims have gone away from focusing on the spirit, focusing on the objectives, and they have given so much importance on the outward factors, on the shell, you can say, that they have forgotten the purpose. And we should not be like those people who focus so much on just external matters that we forget where we were going, But as far as how, and I know the youth, they do ask this question, they're interested and they want to know why do we, have a certain culture practices. Of certain practices. When Ahmadis see that beloved Huzur, may Allah be his helper, visiting various, large gatherings around the world, he visits various parliaments, he has visited the Parliament in Canada, the European Parliament, and so many other great functions we know. But Ahmadis observe that he is the most honorable person, he is the most respected person there, and whatever he has to say is cherished, it's honored, and it's endeared more than what anyone else has to say. So, when we see this, it's only natural that we start to copy some of the things of beloved Hazur. Just as the promised Messiah ﷺ has mentioned, that it's impossible that you claim to love someone, but you don't have at least some of their characteristics, you don't copy some of the things that that person has, you don't copy some of those qualities. We see children nowadays, they idolize stars and athletes, and they copy a lot of the things that those stars or their idols do. They have posters in their rooms, and they can follow them today because of social media. They can follow their daily routines, their workouts, their programs, and they do all this because of love, because they love those stars or those athletes. And so Ahmadis, because we genuinely love Hazur, so it's impossible for us to not replicate some of the dress that he is wearing. So it's not a black and white matter. It's not like, like I mentioned, there's no specific way that you have to dress, but it's just a matter of love, and naturally out of love, we act in this way.
And this brings me to another question, or we could say a follow-up question to that. Can someone still be considered spiritual even though they're not following various traditions? Can they still have that spirituality aspect to them?
Right. So as Sadiq Saab has mentioned, sometimes cultures and religions, they overlap. Sometimes there are some aspects of a religion that creep into the customs of society. And all members of a society, they start practicing those customs or those values. And sometimes they don't even realize that these are actually affiliated with one religion. For example, if you look at Asia, there are women there in societies that may belong to Hinduism or Christianity or Islam, but they all dress modestly. And those Christian and Hindu women do not know about any specific verse, that commands Muslims to cover themselves in some specific way, but they do so naturally because it's a cultural thing. So we have to educate ourselves. It's our responsibility to realize, what things of a culture are genuine, related to Islam, and what things are irrelevant. And if we have to do a compromise with our religion, if they are an innovation in any way, then of course we have to leave them. The Holy Quran further tells us in chapter 49, verse 14, that Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu. That people have been divided in men and women and different races, and different cultures exist, but the fact of the matter is, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable in the sight of Allah is the one who is most righteous. Again, going back to what the promised Messiah ﷺ mentioned about focusing on the spirit. So we have to educate ourselves about what is important. And when we look at cultures and religion, we have to realize what is genuinely a part of religion. And then if it is, we have to make sure we stay on it. And if it isn't, if it's irrelevant, then we can let those things go and continue to increase in our spirituality.
Jazakallah. I mentioned in the beginning of the program that you can send us your comments and questions, and also that today we are conducting an online poll. We asked you that did the culture you grew up in affect the way that you practice your faith? I have the results of that poll here with me now. 45% of the people are saying, who took part in our poll, they're saying that yes, culture did affect the way they practice their faith. 16% are saying that it did not. 34% are saying that it affects them somewhat, and a mere 5% are saying that culture and faith are not related. So a great deal of the people, they are saying that the culture does have an effect on their faith, whether that's in a negative sense or a positive sense.
As I previously mentioned, sometimes aspects of religion, they creep into culture. So people realize that, we can see from this poll, and they realize that it has a great deal or somewhat effect on who they are. So again, it's just a matter of educating ourselves and informing ourselves of what is genuinely related to our religion or related to Islam. And then once we figure that out, then we know which parts of culture we can leave and which part we must adapt.
As you've heard in the discussion thus far, regardless of what the culture is, as long as it fits with the principles of Islam, any culture can be adopted. And a great way of seeing this influence of culture and the adoption of various cultural practices, this goes back even to early Islam. For example, the Holy Prophet ﷺ's mosque in Medina. In the early days, it didn't have any minarets or domes. And architecturally, the mosques, they didn't have any specific shape or a look or a feel. This is a practice that came a little bit later on when Islam reached Baghdad. And in fact, much of what we see in terms of the structure of the mosques today, it came from the influence of the Persian culture. And this really speaks to the fact that Islam has no cultural boundaries. Different cultures can freely adopt it. And this brings our discussion now to the contemporary society and Islam. But before beginning that, let's hear from people living in the Canadian society and see if that has been having an effect on their religious values.
I feel like for most people it is a benefit because like a lot of people who come from like back home, like you can like name a lot of countries, like you can name like China, you can name like Afghanistan, you can name like Syria, there's India, like there's so many countries with like different religions, right? People back home, for example, in like third world countries or whatever, like they focus a lot on religion because like that's how they're brought up.
More or less, it could shape you. It could take you two routes, so to speak, in like a place where you have a lot of freedom. You can have a route where you stay with your religious past, like myself, like I stayed with the Muslim community and I learned from them. Or you could deviate from it and then go about things that are legal here that aren't so, I'd say, aren't right.
In Canada, we have a very modern society where everything is legal. Every person has the right to do whatever they want to do. And that's how our perceptions shape how we deal with religion and how we live our daily lives.
It's just like if you're in that like area of the world where religion is such a big aspect, and there's basically like one type of like one religion that people are focusing on, you'll feel like more obligated to abide by those rules.
I guess this is like a question that ties in with like nature versus nurture, and we're in an environment where you're actually you become a product of your environment. So it could possibly change someone's norms, values, and principles. Yes, that's doable, but it depends on the people you stay around, right?
So Sadiq Saab, let's say for some of the youngsters, they'll say that, okay, you want to practice your religion, and it's easier if it's within the culture or the framework that culture or where that religion will flourish, then why not go back to practicing it there? So is it easier to practice Islam in an Islamic culture versus compared to perhaps here in the Western society?
Right, so our environment, our surroundings, in other words, our culture, it definitely has an impact on our lives. You know, if we try to maintain a positive culture, positive surroundings, you know, we would be able to make better decisions. If our environment is negative, it may lead some people to make bad decisions. So of course, it naturally it has an impact. But having said that, we should try to make such an environment around us which makes it easier for us to practice our faith. You know, people say that, or people argue that, you know, living here in the West, there are so many distractions which take us away from our faith. You know, there's the dating culture, there's drinking, there's partying, so on and so forth. So these things are taking us away from practicing our faith. But you know, we're living in a society, in a world now which has become a global village. And all the distractions which can be found here in this society can be found in any part of the world in one way or another. So to present this argument that, you know, these things are, you know, hindering us or keeping us away from our faith, we can't practice our faith, I think this would be a wrong notion. And an ideal example which is in front of us is the example of our beloved Imam. Look at Sayyidina Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, may Allah be his helper. While living in the West, he's able to practice his faith. While living in the West, not only is he practicing his faith, but he's presenting or he's representing the true image of Islam. And not only that, he's propagating the message of Islam throughout the world. And he's doing this while living in the West. So I think to make this excuse that, you know, because we have so many distractions here, we cannot practice our faith, I think it would be a wrong notion. We should try to make our environment, our surroundings, you know, the group of people we hang out with, our friends, should be such that help us you know, progress in our spirituality rather than, you know, taking us away from our faith. And in order to do that, we have various resources by the grace of Allah at our disposal. You know, look at MTA. We can listen to the Friday sermons of Huzur Anwar every week, or any other lectures that, you know, he may give. If we try to attach ourselves with Khilafat, we listen to what Huzur is telling us and how he's guiding us, then of course it would become easier for us to practice our faith. Our 5 daily prayers, coming to the mosque, the Friday prayer, or when the time of Ramadan comes, fasting, studying the Holy Quran on a daily basis. So these are the things that you can do living in any society, living in any culture. So this is what we should try to do. This is what we should try to strive for, that our surroundings should be such that always reminds us that we have various religious obligations that we have to fulfill. These are our responsibilities. So we should try to adopt such an environment or make such an environment around us which makes it easier for us to practice our faith.
And obviously the environment, it has a great effect, as we heard from some of the individuals there. Everyone seems to realize the company you keep, the environment you keep, how great of an effect that does have on you. And the Muslims growing up here in the Western societies, they have to face a lot of these challenges, as Sadiq Sahab just mentioned. For example, there's a dating culture, there's the drinking culture, even people who, after a hard day's work, their first initial response is to go and sit down and have a drink. And even some other challenges, for example, the hijab for the girls who are growing up in this society. So Hafiz Sahab, maybe you can tell us how can living in these societies, how can they maintain their faith while also living in such countries?
First of all, we have to acknowledge that these are issues that our youth face. They are difficult issues. The culture of dating, or alcohol and drug use, it is a difficult thing, a phase which they have to pass through. The Holy Prophet ﷺ prophesied about this very culture, this atmosphere, when he mentioned about the Dajjal. And there's not enough time to go into the details of the Dajjal, but briefly speaking, it was going to be a time where people would lose faith more than any other time. And the promised Messiah ﷺ was going to help us in this time. And this brings me back to what I was mentioning in the beginning of how Tehreek-e-Jadid has established perfect spiritual and religious communities of Ahmadiyyat around the world. So it's not just that we have to affiliate ourselves with these things, but Islam doesn't just tell us to not do these things. It does say وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, that we believers abstain from all vain things. But it also gives us the philosophy. It also gives us why. It also gives us the reason why these things are bad for us. The promised Messiah ﷺ has told us that Sidq se meri taraf aao, isi mein khair hai, hain darinde har taraf, main afiyat ka hoon hisar. That come to me with truth. This is the best thing you can do. I am. There are wild beasts everywhere, and I am the fortress of security. So, it's just a matter of perspective and understanding. Like I said, these issues, when we look at them, we realize that they're not going to, when we look at them deeply, we will realize that they're not going to give us any kind of eternal happiness or long-lasting happiness. The issues that you just mentioned, dating and such things, they're just means of making us happy quickly and instant gratifications. Sometimes people understand that through many trials and tribulations, through lots of heartbreak, many years of going through these things. Sometimes, if you follow the concepts presented by Islam, you will realize that these things are very plain and bluntly described by Islam. It's just a matter of perspective, about understanding. Nowadays, there's a culture here, it's in fashion to have a beard. And it's in fashion to, intermittent fasting. There's lots of tutorials you can see on YouTube, lots of, things online, guidelines where you can do intermittent fasting to lose weight and remain healthy. And also people pay hundreds of dollars, to join various gym memberships, and they pay instructors even to tell them to, observe various yoga positions which they never would do, which awkward positions which no one would do at home, right? But they do that to remain healthy. It's a culture. It's a fashionable thing. But all these things which I mentioned, Islam has already taught us these things. When we are told to do fasting in Ramadan, and also throughout the year because of the guidelines of beloved Hazur. And also, keeping a beard is a sunnah in Islam. And if we offer salat properly, we obviously engage our core muscles, we engage our hamstrings, our back, we stretch all these muscles. So, these things may be fashionable in a culture, yeah. They may be in and out, and they will change, they will go away. But Islam has been in for 1400 years, even more than that, and it's always going to remain in. It's a guideline for us to be the best version of who we can be. They talk a lot about, finding identity here, right? But Islam is very clear and blunt about this. It tells us you should have no kind of inferiority complex. And we need to have confidence in who we are. We need to take pride in who we are. And find out who you are. You're much bigger than these things. You're much better than these things. And Islam enables us to reach the best potential that we can be. There are some things in this society that we can adapt, like smiling and being on time. But this has also been mentioned in the hadith. But we have to make sure we do not compromise our religion, and we know where to draw the line. Because if we become too much like people in this society, then the Holy Prophet ﷺ has also warned us that man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum, that then whoever resembles the people too much, then we will become like them. So we have to remember where.
Jazakallah, Hafiz Saab. I mentioned in the beginning of the program that you can send us your social media comments and questions through Instagram and through Twitter using hashtag BeaconMTA. We can, in the last few minutes of our program, take a few of these comments and questions. Varda Faryal Sahiba, she writes that the culture that is established based on Islamic values, it promotes a healthier and more peaceful society. Religion is God-made and it is perfect, whereas culture is man-made and it is often flawed. And we can do a few quick questions, and within 30 seconds, if you guys can answer. The first question, let's go with you, Hafiz Saab. This is from Aiza Anwar Saiba. She asked that why do we need religion when some people are just, good people?
Right. So this is a very naive understanding. I mean, it's not as simple as that. If I ask someone to define what good is, I'm sure no one can agree on the one definition of what good is. It's subjective from person to person. If we took a survey from various countries, we gave people a list of things to put them in good and bad, I'm sure that around the world we would never get the same good and bad things in the same list if you put like abortion, alcohol, praying, in,
right.
Presumably good and bad things. So when we can't agree on what good is, how can we just be good without any reference point? So Islam gives us that reference point, and it tells us how we can follow a criteria and a guideline.
And a moral compass.
Exactly.
Right. Another comment from Amir Sohail Sahib. He comments that nowadays many Muslims use Western culture as an excuse to not follow Islamic teachings. It is our job as Ahmadi Muslims to set an example, not only for non-Ahmadi Muslims, but for our next generation as well. And the best way, obviously, to do that is to follow the Islamic tenets and the Islamic teachings. One more question for you, Sadiq Saab. This question comes in. Someone asked that in the Western culture, people celebrate birthdays. And they're asking, are we allowed to celebrate our children's birthdays as well?
Right, I think for this, we revert back to the example of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Whenever we are in need of such guidance, we should always turn to see what the practice of the Holy Prophet ﷺ was. And from his practice, we can see that he did not celebrate his birthday,
right.
Nor did his companions, nor did the Khulafa after him. And now coming into this day and age, the example of the promised Messiah al-Islam and his Khulafa, no one celebrated birthdays. So these are various cultural elements that creep into religion, and some people, they think that they're so important that we have to follow them and we have to do what everyone else around is doing. Someone recently asked Sayyidina Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, may Allah be his helper, in regards to this, and Hazur says that when someone tells me or reminds me that it's my birthday, I turn to Allah the Almighty. I offer prayers, nawafil. I'm thankful to Allah Ta'ala that He has given me life and He has given me health. I give sadaqah, give something in charity. So this is the example that is in front of us, that how we should celebrate our birthday, rather than, parties and spending money, wasting money, so on and so forth. We have these examples in front of us, which teach us how we should do things in Islam.
And we'll take one last comment. This comes in from S. Usman Sahib. He writes that parents should teach their children how to live Islam, not how to impress society and culture. And I think this reiterates a lot of what we have discussed here today. Now, we began the discussion today by defining what is culture and what is religion, and how, being Muslims, we cannot compromise our religious values. Today, we also discussed how certain cultural practices, they end up bringing harmful innovations, and over a time, those innovations can completely change the pristine teachings of the religion. We've also debunked this notion of Islam not being compatible with the West. And as you heard today, Islam has no cultural boundaries. In fact, one of Islam's beauties is that it accepts all that is ultimately good, and it rejects all that is ultimately harmful. And it promotes the adopting of all cultural values that are beneficial and that have merit. And as Muslims, we need to take pride in what we have. and take pride in our values regardless of what the societal trends may be. Jazakallah Hafiz Saab, Jazakallah Sadiq Sahib for joining our discussion here today, a very interesting and insightful discussion. Thank you to our viewers for joining in. Please do send us your feedback and comments at our Twitter handle, which is at beacon_MTA, or you can also email us at beacon@mta.tv. Join us again same time next week at 1900 GMT on Beacon of Truth. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.
लाएंगे सदाकते इस्लाम कुछ भी हो, जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना पड़े हमें, जाएंगे हम जहाँ भी के जाना